Good afternoon, everyone. We're very happy to see you again for this ninth edition, I think, of our Gaza Excellence Talks. This is a series of webinars, high-level scientific webinars, jointly organized by Academic Solidarity with Palestine and 3 universities in Gaza, the University of Al-Aqsa, the University of Palestine, about which Dr. Nadine will say a few words, and the University College of Applied Sciences, all 3 of them in Gaza, UCAS, about which Dr. Asma will say a few words. Thank you for being here. This is with and for Gaza. Although universities in Gaza have been destroyed, Gazan scholarship, Gazan universities are still active, and we are happy to show the solidarity of scholars around the world with Gazan students, Gazan scholars, and Gazan universities. Dr. Nadine, if you would like to say a few words on behalf of the University of Palestine.
Thank you very much, Christine. I would really like to start by thanking Academic Solidarity with Palestine for organizing these talks. It's actually always been a pleasure to be a part of these talks, and kind of giving us, you are showing a lot of support towards Gaza and people in Gaza, especially the higher education. In terms of the University of Palestine, it's actually an academic institution. It was established in 2005 in Gaza Strip to provide actually high quality of education. We have 11 different faculties ranging from dentistry, engineering, we've got digital sciences, we've got media. During the war and with all the destruction we had, and it was actually for all universities in Gaza Strip, we actually switched to online teaching and learning. That was since May 2024, which with all the destruction we had, we still have and had the courage to go on. We actually managed to get our systems up and get our students to be enrolled in our systems. And we managed to even deliver some graduates to join the workforce as well during the war. And after the war, we are kind of recovering now, starting again, trying to mix between face-to-face and online schemes, especially for training and laboratories sessions for students. So I really want to thank Academic Solidarity with Palestine, and I would like to thank our speaker today, Prof. Duflo, for her time and for her support. And I'm pretty sure that it's going to be insightful talk we're going to have today. And so thank you very much again. And I'll pass the mic back to you, Christine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Nadine. Asma, if you could, I know you have a bit of a hoarse voice today, but if you would like to say a few words on behalf of UCAS.
Yeah, I'm a bit under the weather today, but it's all of the time opens my heart to join such talk. So all of the thanks for you and all of the thanks for those who are attending today, and special thanking for Academic Solidarity for Palestine for raising our voices and speak the voices of the voiceless there in Gaza. I'm representing today the University College of Applied Science, which is one of the largest technical universities in Palestine. It serves approximately more than 11,000 students across more than 60 disciplines, offering bachelor, diploma, and professional diploma programs to meet the urgent demands of the labor market. UCAS was established in 1998 by the decision of the Ministry of Higher Education and was initially named as the Community College of Applied Science to have its way to be a university college in the future. At that time, it was the only institution in Gaza in providing educational type of education. Unfortunately, the University College of Applied Science has lost more than 50 of its academic and administrative staff as martyrs during the genocidal war And since October the 7th, 2023, Gaza has endured an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe, and tens of thousands of lives have been lost. The University College of Applied Science has lost most of its infrastructure and facilities, reducing all its buildings, facilities, and advanced laboratories. Advanced laboratories to rubble. But these labs known to be being the most modern and specialized among universities in Palestine, and they played a crucial role in academic and scientific development. But this deliberate destruction brought academic activities at UCAS to stand still. However, thanks to the resilience and deduction of the colleagues and administration, faculty, and staff, UCAS has continued its mission against all the odds, operating from its branches in Khan Yunis, and try to facilitate the new hope for the students and try to, absorb our life back amid all of the adversities and difficulties. And now we are approaching the 5th semester studying online. Thank you for raising our voices up, and thank you for this opportunity. I think that this will be a very fruitful and inspiring talk. Thank you, and it's for you.
Thank you so much, dear Asma. So unfortunately, our third partner, Al-Aqsa, cannot be present due to the internet connect problems in Gaza, but they are here with us in spirit. Let me now introduce today's speaker, world-famous Dr. Esther Duflo. Esther Duflo is the Abdul Latif Jameel Professor of Poverty, Alleviation, and Development Economics in the Department of Economics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the United States. She is the co-founder and co-director of the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab, JPAL. She's also the chair of the de la Chaire Pauvreté et politiques publiques at the Collège de France in France, and president of the Paris School of Economics. In her research, she seeks to understand the economic lives of the poor with the aim to help design and evaluate social policies. She has worked on health, education, financial inclusion, environment, and governance. Esther Duflo has received numerous academic honors and prizes, including the 2019 Nobel Prize in Economics, together with co-Laureates Abhijit Banerjee and Michael Kremer. She also received the John Bates Clark Medal in 2010, and a MacArthur Genius Grant Fellowship in 2009. With Abhijit Banerjee, she has written Poor Economics, a radical rethinking of the way to fight global poverty, as well as Good Economics for Hard Times. Esther Duflo recently released the children's book, Poor Economics for Kids. Dr. Esther Duflo, thank you so much for being here with us and with all Gazan scholars and students. And now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, wherever you are. Good morning for me. It's a pleasure to be here, and really a very small thing to do to accompany you in your journey, hopefully a journey of recovery. I am going to start sharing some slides. I call this talk Science Against Poverty 20 years later. You might wondering 20 years after what? So after what? One possibility is that 20 years after my first lectures at the Collège de France, where I had called it Science Against Poverty, and about 15 years after we published Poor Economics. But let me first tell you a little bit about what I do. So about 23 years ago, I started a network of researchers called at the time Poverty Action Lab, which became subsequently the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab when Mohamed Jameel came on board. At the time, it was a very small network of about 8 people. Today, it's a much larger network of over 1,000 researchers around the world. What do we do? Well, our objective is to fight poverty with scientific evidence. What does this mean? Concretely, what this means is that we are trying to go against the easy thinking, which is, in the case of anti-poverty program, often the idea is that, I have an intuition that this should work or that should work, and we are just, doing it with very little understanding of whether it's going to make a difference or not. And in a lot of cases, for poor people who are the subject of these policies, they have very little choices. So it's not that they can refuse to take a program because it's not a good one, because they don't have an alternative. For example, if the government is providing schools, but the schools are not very good, it's not that people really have a choice to go elsewhere. And as a result, anti-poverty policy tends to be dominated by whatever is the fashion of the day. And therefore, it's kind of very hard to know whether anything works. Maybe something works, but we don't know, or maybe a lot of things are not as effective as they could be. So what we decided to do is to bring to policy evaluation the rigor that you find in medical trials. So in medical trials, when there is a new drug or a new vaccine or something like that, the participants are spread into 2 or more groups randomly. So you are sure that everyone in the population is more or less equally represented in both groups. And then within these 2 groups, one group receives the program, one group receives the status quo, or maybe it's 2 versions of a program. And then you can measure outcomes and estimate the impact as the difference between what's happening in a treatment group and what's happening in a comparison group. So, for example, if one group receives the COVID vaccine and one group doesn't receive the COVID vaccine, you can check within the next few weeks and months whether the fraction of people who get very sick with COVID in both groups, and see whether it makes a difference. And this is exactly how we knew that the COVID vaccine was effective. So we do this, but instead of doing it for medicine, since we are not doctors, we tend to be social scientists, we do it for policy. We started, as I was saying, we started 8 of us. We are now about thousands of us. It's been a little over 20 years. We have offices in every continent. So let me highlight for the sake of this particular audience, Jameel, which is located in Cairo, and if we were to work in Gaza, would be the nodal point. But offices are in every continent. Sometimes we have even more than one office in a continent, and we have conducted this evaluation across a number of sectors: agriculture, crime, violence and conflict, education, environment and energy, finance, etc., across the world, and a total of 2,500 evaluations or so. The partners are always of 3 kinds. They need to be an academic who is taking the lead, usually without any funding to do the work for their own time. Then there are implementer. So an academic could be, for example, a professor at the University of Cairo. An implementer could be the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development, and then a funder who is actually funding the work, could be Community Jameel or the Case Foundation or whoever can fund the work. We work across all sectors, so these are our different sectors, and we have some cross-cutting initiative, climate change, artificial intelligence, and humanitarian protection, for which we have one initiative. And on top of that, we are trying to embed, we work with governments and partners through embedded labs. So in Egypt, for example, we have the Egypt Impact Lab. In Cape Town, we have the Water, Air and Energy Labs. These are working within the institution to help policymakers, practitioners to work not just on one project, but on a collection of projects that can be connected in topic, for example, water, air, and energy, and can learn from each other. So the lab learns from each other, and within the lab, the learning from one project can be applied to something else. There is a combination of projects at various stages of maturity, some from pilot work all the way to scale up of things that work. So our objective from the beginning was not just to do research, but to make sure that this research was going to make a difference to the life of real people in the ground. So the objective was always that we would be able to share this evidence and use it to inform policy. So a sign of this is whether people's lives are actually being touched by what we learned. And over the years, we are kind of trying to count it. It's a bit difficult to count, but we made an effort. As of 2023, we had reached 600 million people. And in the next 10 years, we aim to have reached 1 billion people. By not through our own programming, but by the programming of others that is being influenced by our findings. So this is the work of JPAL. As I explained, it's a network. It's mostly not my work. Some of it is mine, but I think the most important is not so much my own work. It's the fact that I've tried to create institutions that facilitate the work of others. One note I will say is that we have a little bit of a relationship with Gaza already through training. So one of the things that I thought was very important to do starting about 5 years ago is to make sure that the methods were not constrained to people in highly resourced institutions in Europe or in the US, but that a lot of people all around the world could learn this technique and apply them to their own settings. To this end, we put online a number of MIT level master's courses, and we have kind of diffused them. So some of them got diffused through the work of Heinz Müller in MIT. Some of them got diffused in Gaza with very many students, like in pretty crazy circumstances, managing to go till the end of the course. And we are hoping to do more as it becomes more possible to work as we are hopefully heading towards some level of recovery, so that academics in Gaza actually have these tools in their hands to apply them in the setting where there will be so much to do and so much to learn. So about 15 years ago, we published a book. We being Abhijit Banerjee and myself, we wrote a book based on our research and that of all of the others who are conducting this work in development. And we tried to draw some general lessons, but perhaps the most important lesson was the world never stops to teach us about how to do good economics. And sometimes the message and the messenger may not be the one that we expect. So what we were trying to do in 2011, there were not as many projects today. There were quite a few, but there weren't as many projects as today. And so given the available evidence, we went out on a limb on some issues and tried to make some guesses, about what this all means. And it's been 15 years, so what I thought we could do, so it's kind of time to take stock. And we wrote a new edition of Poor Economics that just came out this fall, where we added a chapter at the beginning and a chapter at the end to show what we got right, what we got wrong, and what we forgot altogether, which we shouldn't have. What I thought I would do today is to kind of walk you through a few examples of things we got right and things we got wrong about various aspects of the life of poor people around the world. So the first chapter I want to go over is the idea of nutrition. So in many settings, of course, the Gaza setting is very harrowing and unrepresentative of what's happening outside of war and conflict. But in many settings, there is still undernutrition. So people are, even in a country like India, for example, which is not that poor anymore in many ways, many people aren't properly fed. Many children continue to be undernourished, and this is not improving very fast. And what we had predicted in the book is that the traditional food subsidy program, where you're paying for some amount of food, would not help that much, probably, because they end up being more like an income subsidy program. They are not very dissimilar from just giving people money. But when people have more money, it's not clear that at the time, it was not clear to us that they would spend all of that money on food. And at the time, there was some recent study that indirectly suggested that the income elasticity of food consumption, which is how much more food people would get if they had more money, outside of, again, extreme circumstances like the one you're experiencing, might be zero or even negative. But subsequently, we learned that it's actually not the case. We learned that taking people who are very poor today and providing them with a better livelihood through asset transfer or through cash transfer was actually leading to a lot of that extra money is actually spent on food. As people get more money, they actually do it more, sometimes more than proportionally. So even though the share of food in their budget is lower than what you would think, once you give them extra money, they actually spend more of that on food. And in some sense, we should have known that, because the person who explained to me, who was a man in a very poor area in Morocco, who explained to me that there were things that are more important than food, he also told me that if he had more money than now that these things are taken care of, he would spend more on food. So for example, out of 7 conditional cash transfer, 5 increase food shares and 2 have no effect. The income elasticity of food is 1.19 for monthly transfer, which means that more than 1%, if you increase income by 10%, more than 10% is spent on food. And in fact, although stunting rates are still incredibly high in India for a country at that level of income, they are still going down. So why is that the case? Well, one possibility is that it's all about the gender of the recipient, that if you give the money to women, it will be more effective. This is not what we seem to find. Another possibility is that some of these programs are labeled, they are worded in terms of investing in the children's future, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Across about 90 programs that were evaluated, the labeling doesn't make a huge difference. And finally, the last possibility is this idea of hope working like a capability. So cash transfer that are regular open up the possibility of going from pure subsistence to a more fulfilling, productive life. And therefore, you can start saying, okay, I'm now looking up. I can start eating more in order to become more productive. And in a sense, people are more willing to take care of themselves, including by eating more, which is what the poor people need to do because they are not eating enough, including also eating better food, in the sense of better for you food, when this transfer comes in. So this is something that we had perhaps missed. And so a second thing we had looked at in poor economics is the idea of microcredit. So microcredit at the time was really all the rage, very, very fashionable. Mohamed Yunus had gotten the Nobel Prize not very long ago. And at the same time, there also started to be a backlash where some people saying, oh, people are actually, borrowing and not being able to reimburse their debt. So it's not that good for them. We had predicted that on the basis of the first few studies, that we would probably in between, that there would be not massive effect one way or the other, that there would be no miracle of microfinance, that with or without microfinance, most people do not want to be entrepreneurs. Some people have to because there is no job to be had, but most people would prefer a job. And that bottom line conclusion is now confirmed by many studies and meta-analysis. In particular, 7 studies that were analyzed together, which shows that basically you get very little that's happening. People are, when microfinance becomes available, you find almost no effect on anything for the majority of people and for the median person. No effect on consumption, no effect on business earning, no effect on profit, no effect on well-being, and so on. Consistent with that, we were involved in an RCT in Andhra Pradesh where an organization, microcredit organization, tried to tie microcredit to insurance. People didn't want a health insurance because they didn't think it was a very good program. And so what they did is that they dropped out. So 27% of clients dropped out of the program rather than paying the increased fee. And again, nothing happened. Nothing happened in their life. So in total, this is the result from a Bayesian meta-analysis of the program that shows basically that very little effect. None of the effects are significantly different from zero across good competition goods, revenues, profit, expenditure, consumption, durables, and so on. So per se, it doesn't mean it's useless. It helps people move the use of money, for example, accumulate and save. In particular, and when a lot of people when microcredit got removed from a lot of people at the same time, it had negative effect on consumption and earnings, perhaps because of Keynesian effect of a sudden drop in consumption. What we have since learned is that there is significant heterogeneity in the impact, and in particular, some people who were already very entrepreneurial before microcredit came in, so they already had a business, were benefiting from the program. And what we're finding is that the treatment effect for these people grows over time and becomes actually very large. So these are the people who were already investing in before microcredit came. Microcredit came, they actually invested more in their business. For some of them, it was not that good, but for some of them, it really increased their profit, and they were able to escape a low investment trap. So this implies that there is huge benefits in targeting credit better to the best entrepreneurs and finding products that fit their need, as opposed to saying, oh, well, we are just going to open shop and offer this one program to everyone, and then it will be exactly the same. You're getting a bunch of cash, you're repaying every week regularly. And there is a new wave of experiment that tries to target microcredit better that finds exactly that. The next idea is the idea that we really pushed in poor economics is the idea that there might be poverty traps. And poverty trap is one reason why it might be important to aggressively redistribute towards those who have very, very little, because if they are stuck in a trap, just by providing them resources when they are stuck in this trap, you might unlock these opportunities for them. And completely change the life they have. However, at the time, there was not that much evidence of a poverty trap, and all the evidence was indirect and not that good. Since then, there have been much progress made on a program that exactly worked under this assumption, which is a program started by the organization BRAC in Bangladesh, targeted to the poorest of the poor. So what BRAC realized is that when they came to some villages, some people did not even participate to their regular programming because they didn't want a loan, they had nothing to do, they didn't want to send their kids to school, they were kind of outcast and away from the village. And so these people, they need something different. They need very concentrated help that is going to be a combination of an asset, but also a lot of hand-holding for how to take care of this asset at the beginning of life. So in rural areas, it's a cow. In urban areas, it could be some money to start a shop or a sewing machine for starting a clothes business or something like that. And they launched an RCT first in Bangladesh and then in 7 other countries. And what they found early on is this: across countries, you have this really positive effect after 18 months. This graph shows after 18 months and after 3 years. And then so they have more productive assets, they work longer hours, they earn more, they're happier and healthier. So the consumption per head and the income per head are on average 40% higher. And then we continued by looking at the effect 10 years later in India, and then 17 years later is what we have now. The consumption effects stay constant, and for income the impact grows between year 3 and 7 and also between the year 10 and 15 and 17. So it really seemed that this program has taken them out of a poverty trap. This is a temporary program that lasted, one asset transfer one time, and then support for about 18 months around the program, and that led to this permanent effect. So this suggests that poverty traps do exist and they matter. The next topic we looked at is the one of education, which would be particularly of interest to you who are all, working in the education sector. I'm going to be talking about the primary school. And primary schools is kind of has now been recognized like everywhere, all around the world, as being a absolutely central things to offer to children, so that they can operate in the world. But at the same time, so most kids now go to school, even in very difficult circumstances, they continue to go to school. And but in most kids do not learn that very well in school, even in places where the schools are there and people are able to go. So what is in the way? So what we had shown in poor economics is that the obvious things that people think about, like, the kids don't eat enough, or they don't have the right infrastructure, they don't have teachers. This is not something that is an issue in many countries. It could very well be an issue in Gaza, all of those, but it's not an issue in India, for example, where they have a school building in every village. It's not an issue in Côte d'Ivoire, where there is a school everywhere and there are many teachers as well. We argued that the issue was more one of pedagogy, was a system which kind of was more constituted as a way of like a series of hoops to jump, as opposed to a place where people could learn. And as a result, did not identify talent that was there and produced very little learnings. This is a little school in Morocco. Our evidence at the time came from the success of approaches that focused on teaching kids at the level where they are. So in particular, teaching at the right level, which was originally promoted by Pratham in India, then moved to Ghana, then moved all over the African continent, and is now, for example, countrywide in Côte d'Ivoire, and in many states wide in India, where it is a simple idea that you group children not by their age, but by the level that they have. And then you really frequently change these groups around. So kids, if they don't know how to recognize letters, they start with that, and then they move to words, and then they move to paragraphs, and so on. Since then, there is a few pieces of evidence that came in that were quite striking. One is that when it's possible, a software that targets learning to precise level of the children has hugely positive impacts. The second is children are able to learn mathematics in preschool just as well in India as they are in Cambridge, Massachusetts. They make just the same progress through very abstract math, which then helps them with the school math. And the third is looking at children in markets. So this is the preschool program. So this is based on psychological research by Stan Dehn in Paris, Liz Pelke in Harvard. So one thing, for example, that everyone knows how to do is to say there is more dots on the left than on the right. So this is intuitive knowledge we all have, and it can be trained. And as you train it, you become better at it. And as you become better at it, you are also kind of better ready to absorb abstract concept. So these are knowledge of geometry. These are also intuitive knowledge of counting till 1 to 3, which children have naturally before it's being taught to them. So the kids went through this program in preschool, and in our first version of the program, once they reached regular schools, they were not able to use that knowledge because the way that math was taught in school did not leverage the knowledge that was there. Then a new version of the program was tying specifically this intuitive mathematics to more formal mathematics, and that led to durable improvement in math. So this was our first, original learning of abstract math between treatment and control, actually. And then originally we had, in the original version of the program, we find no effect in formal mathematics that they are learning once they reach school. So then we were able to combine the two, so that now we have a version of the program that combine abstract learning, intuitive learning with the learning of numbers and symbols, symbolic math learning that's helpful in school. And we are now finding progress. But that suggests that the teachers were not able to realize that the kids had this knowledge. A similar example for teens is young people who sell in markets. We had observed were very good at doing, addition, subtraction, etc. And we showed systematically that it is the case that the kids selling in markets are much better than kids their own age who are in school at doing arithmetic in their head. But once you start asking them school-level questions with paper and pencil, they are completely unable to do it. And it's not because they cannot write or read. They have often gone to school till the age of 12 or 13. It's more because the moment you present to them a program like a problem in the form of a school math problem, they feel they have to mobilize their school-type knowledge. And then because it's half-baked in their mind, it's not fully understood, they are unable to do it. Whereas if you give them a market problem, so a mental math involving, fruits and vegetables, they are able to mobilize the skills they do have, which are very deep arithmetic skills. So when we sent surveyor these guys as shopper in markets in Kolkata, they 98% of the cases they were able to do it. You can see it, the market children, they got it correct like 95% of the time, when the school children only get it about half the time. But when we gave them like the more standard math problem, the market children are often, only 17% of them are able to do a simple division. Only 32% of them are able to do a subtraction. And the rest are not able to do it. The school children have much better level of abstract math, but they are completely incapable of doing the applied math. So we have two sets of kids, one that has excellent applied skills, but is not able to apply it in school, one who has a decent school skill, but is absolutely unable to apply it in real life, And then that suggests that the school system is really missing something about how to exploit the knowledge that's already there. The next point, which is maybe a little bit overarching and maybe would leave you with a little food for thought, is the power of small things. So often in economics, we like to think about, when I explain to my colleagues what I do, they say, well, why are you doing this? This is not very intellectual. This is like very detailed. And in any case, none of this stuff matters because unless we have good institutions and good political processes, good policies cannot really be implemented. And conversely, as long as we have good institutions, the policies will be good, and therefore, the good things will emerge, and the bad things will kind of die out. And what we want to argue is that that's not the case, because a lot of life is made of small things. Like even in extraordinarily difficult environment like the one you are in, it's still possible to do something like we are doing today, and it makes a difference. Even in good environment where there is no war, there is peace, etc., there are plenty of bad programs to go around. So it was perhaps our most controversial statement, which is that the general principles are insufficient to guide policy. Policymakers need and they lack guidance on the details of how to implement these good policies. So in the intervening years, we've come up with a term for this, which is plumbing, which is the idea that the details of public policy, not necessarily guided by the principle, often are ignored by academics and policymakers and are left to technicians or are left to nobody. Something is decreed, is saying, a decision is made that there will be a school committee in every school. And then it's assumed that it happens. And this is a real example. And it just, there's absolutely no implementation in the ground. I'll give you one example of this power of small things, really small things, which is the rice distribution program in Indonesia, which provides eligible households with 15 kilo per month of heavily subsidized rice. Since then, that program has changed. The program is centrally mandated and funded, but it's locally implemented by village head. And there's a lot of corruption in it. Part of the problem, and that explains why there is so much corruption, is a lot of people do not know that they are eligible and how much they should pay, and therefore some eligible people don't get it, and some eligible people who get it pay too much for it. So the eligible only receive 1/3 of the intended subsidy, and the rest sort of disappears along the way. So the plumbing question here is, would it be sufficient to inform people that they are eligible and what they are eligible for? And would that be enough? Would this small change be enough to increase the subsidy that eligible people can receive? So the government distributed cards that are about this way. And then what the researchers argue is that we should try to see what things are important. So for example, whether the card says there's a small change in this card, which you can see if you look very, very closely, which is that the one on my right of the screen talks about the price. Number 2 is the price at which people should be getting the rice. There are other things that were tried, for example, whether everyone or some people get the card, whether there are also posters in the village, and so on. The findings, so this was all done in NRCT, so different villages got various versions of the card, and the findings were the following. First, sending out identification cards dramatically improved the subsidy. Second, the very specific way in which the card is produced and distributed is very important. So public information doubled its impact. If you give the price information on the card, it improves. A physical proof of information was important. And on the other hand, putting clip of coupon for increasing the perceived accountability didn't make a difference. because this information was designed working closely with the Indonesian government and was designed in response to their request, it was immediately adopted nationwide. It was scaled up nationally in June 2013. So just to conclude, ultimately, several years since poor economics have made us even more convinced of a few things. First of all, we as economists have some tools that we can use to help policymakers understand the problem they face better. Some in difficult circumstances like yours, and some in okay circumstances, but there are still problems. There are a few things we understand, like incentives, the interplay of psychology and economics, the role of information. And increasingly, we have a chance to intervene in the world. But it's not enough to kind of sit in our office and make some pronouncement as to what the big principles should be, because policy making involves a considerable share of mudding through, making some attempts, getting it wrong, trying again. And if we want to be useful, we would have to argue to engage with this process and get our hands dirty. So that's an opportunity, that's a responsibility as well. By being relentless about details, we progressively are more likely to get some of the big picture correct as well. So some of the conjecture of poor economics were wrong, but some turned out to be correct and have been helpful in guiding a future policy. So why does this leave us, for you guys? In part, it's the idea that hopefully if we are in a situation where in the next many years you're able to rebuild something, it's never going to be like, oh, we need to do this, like some people are like proclaiming, like this needs to happen this way, and coming up with some kind of grand vision and big principles and so on. It's going to happen through a series of, maybe looking at what has been done elsewhere and adapting it, but also kind of trying things out, seeing what plays out and not trying to kind of legislate everything from 50,000 feet up with consultants and so on, coming up with kind of this like big brush ideas. I think it's good news and bad news. The good news part is that it means there should be considerable amount of local ownership in getting this done. The bad news is that that's probably going to take some time to get right. But as long as we know that, we can be patient about it and make progress for the people who so much need it. Thank you so much for being here, for remaining engaged and being so resilient. Thank you for the organizer to have invited me, and I'm now open for discussion and questions.
Thank you so much, Esther. This was beautiful and fascinating. I will now leave the floor to Dr. Zombor and Dr. Swarnodeep, who will be organizing the debate, taking the questions from the audience and starting the debates with you. Zombor and Swarnodeep, it's you.
Yeah, so I don't see any questions as of yet, or maybe one is just coming in. So maybe we can start, Swarnodeep, and then as the questions come in, we'll structure them and address them as well. Do you want to start?
Yes. Absolutely. Thank you, Zombor. Esther, hi, fascinating talk. I am from Kolkata, and I've actually seen parts of your projects being run. So we understand how it works for communities that really needs it. What I would start off asking is, much of your earlier work is on foreign aid, right? And the effectiveness of foreign aid. And if we think about post-war reconstruction, irrespective of geography, a lot of foreign aid will probably be required, but foreign aid is now also at the fault line of politics and local legitimacy. So how do you foresee the role of foreign aid in reconstruction at a time when foreign aid itself is politicized and could potentially also be otherwise in the hands of actors that are unpalatable in a different circumstance.
Yeah, thank you. So that allows me to clarify that almost none of my work is about foreign aid. My work is really about how to make policy effective, and the money is not in foreign aid. I mean, there are extreme situations where there can be a lot of foreign aid for earthquake, for example, but most of the money that is being spent on the poor worldwide is being spent by governments.
Yeah, of course.
Most of my work is with governments of the relevant country and has nothing to do with foreign aid. So basically, I've had absolutely no interest in foreign aid for the longest time. Starting all my talks saying the question of whether aid matters or it doesn't matter is of no interest, because what matters is policy effectiveness, and that's not a foreign aid problem. So in some sense, none of my work has been about foreign aid, and I kind of, to some extent, as long as it was there, humming around, I was not paying attention to it. And now that, the USAID, for example, got kind of pulverized in one day, essentially, I'm kind of looking backward and saying, what was it serving? What purpose was it serving? And if it's always going to come back, in what form should it come back? So I've become, in some sense, more interested in foreign aid now that it's not here anymore. The situation in a post-war situation is different. For the two reasons you mentioned. Number one, it's potentially a lot of money, and number two, the legitimacy of said money is potentially contested, and number three, it goes with really a lot of ideology. So we've seen this in Afghanistan, we've seen it in Iraq, where, in a sense, it's kind of a little bit, in both settings, a little bit beyond the question of effectiveness, in the sense that it was so ill-guided that it's kind of hard to even begin to think about what could have been done better. But maybe it was sort of a concentrate of what I'm talking about, of ideology taking over effectiveness, which you're finding at some degree anywhere and everywhere, but particularly maybe in post-war situation where there is one, a lot of money to be spent in a short period of time, and b, no real desire or possibility to involve the populations. So I think that's kind of raises its own set of problems. That's quite that's different from your standard problems of how to make something effective, and are not very, make things quite difficult. So hopefully this is not how it's going to play out here.
Thank you, Esther.
I also have a question. Actually, I was very surprised to learn about the overambitious curricular issue that you presented, or that you talked about also today. I was wondering, to what extent is this also a problem throughout the world, so also in the developed world, because we see school performance falling, even in the United States and Western Europe. And so do you think, or do you have any evidence that it is the same problem driving that is sort of a disconnect between what is demanded by the school system and by the educators and the real life acquired capabilities of the children?
So it's a problem that you find throughout the formerly colonized part of the world. Partly because, so you're finding in Africa, you're finding in Asia, because the systems are inherited from colonial systems that were set up to create a very small minority of clerks that were there for the support of the colonial era. So they were created as elite systems from the get-go, and then they got converted into mass system at independence with no evolution. So that's why the problem is particularly concentrated in low and middle income countries today, because they are of that former colonial past. In rich countries, it depends. You have a country like Finland, which is one of the best performers in Europe for for the PISA or this type of test. They don't have an elite-biased system. They don't start reading until 7. They have a very strong kind of everyone has to get something before you move on kind of idea. And in fact, they are doing quite well. You take France, which imposed on itself the same type of educational system it was imposing in Africa at the same time, which has excellent performance at the top and terrible performance at the bottom, which has a rigid system. It's not just elite bias, but it's also very rigid, and people need to move toward that system. And in fact, as we try to improve it, we kind of increase the rigidity from age 5 instead of. But then you have the US, completely different issue. The problem in the US is the opposite, which is they have no standards, like none. Yeah, or at least they had none until Common Core came on, and where they had very minimal standards. And so the issue of the US is that because there are no standards, there is infinite differentiation by school. And, especially since the funding is local, and so kids, the rich kids go to rich schools where they learn a lot of things, and the poor kids go to poor schools where they are not even, trying to teach them anything. So no wonder they don't know anything. So that's a different issue. So presumably in a system like the US, the solution would also be different.
Okay. So you emphasize the heterogeneity of the origin of these problems and the way
in rich countries, it's quite the sort of problem is different. And therefore, probably the solution would be different. In poor countries, there is more of homogeneity due to the colonial past.
I understand. Thank you very much. Meanwhile, a question comes from Pierre Jameel. This goes back, I think, to the previous discussion. How receptive are governments to these programs? I suppose that's programs that your institutes are involved in. Is it difficult to go against rigid economic ideologies?
So it's sort of generally pretty open, but I have a bit of a biased sample because I talk to whoever is willing to talk to me. So I don't really go out of my way to try to convince people who are not willing to be convinced, because it's kind of a lost cause. So if someone really is like totally convinced of either a broad ideology or even like the usefulness of a particular thing, then trying to convince them otherwise is very difficult. But there are enough people who are, especially not at the highest level, but at the level below, in charge of a department or in charge of a region, who are very curious and who basically want to do something good, but they're not necessarily wedded to what it is. And therefore, there are a lot of people to talk to. There was a great study, for example, in Brazil, where researchers went to a mayor's conference, and they showed them some evidence of how to improve preschools, for example. And mayors were really keen to find out, how they could improve preschools. And when they went back a few weeks later, they had implemented some of the ideas that were present to them at the conference. So there is a lot of openness at that level, and plenty to keep us busy, and that's why we managed to get so much impact it's because there are a lot of people to talk to. I would say that in my experience, it's been much easier to talk to people in many low and middle income countries, either in the African continent or in India or in Indonesia, where people are actually quite open, at least, the people on the ground. And that in richer countries, being the US, especially right now, or France, it's a bit more set, the ideologies, and you need to make a bit, it's more effort to convince people.
Thank you for that. We also have at the moment, it's not really a question, but more like a point raised by Abed Chokri. I hope my pronunciation is right. And I think his intention is to highlight the difference in the situation in Gaza from all the other countries. And so I think the question could be framed in a frame as like, to what extent can we gain generalizable insights from your studies, or is there any alternative to running RCTs on the ground in the specific circumstances?
Yeah, so of course there is a limit to what can be generalized, and then there is also a limit to what can be run in specific circumstances. I should say the humanitarian world, so the people who are dealing with post-conflict situation, are extremely, I've really impressed myself in their ability to run experiments, often because they so much need to know what they can do that they are willing to try things out. So for example, and you get, so there are already insights that are coming from other post-conflict situations, which obviously are much more useful in Gaza than insights that you would get from, more traditional situations. So I'll give you one example, which came from refugee camp in Bangladesh, where refugees from Myanmar come. And this is work by Reshma Hussain, and she was interested in knowing whether people derive meaning from work. And because in a lot of post-conflict situation, people are helped. In the best situation, in best circumstances, people are helped out, but there's nothing for them to do. Refugees are not allowed to work, for example. So they sit there in a refugee camp and they just, manage their day-to-day lives, but they don't work. And what she found is that when people were given a choice between doing some work, she gave them basically a choice between being paid, just receiving their standard aid, or versus working and then receiving a wage. People really wanted to receive a wage. In fact, they were willing to receive less in wages than they would get in daily payment. And then the people who got a chance to receive a wage and work, they work as surveyors inside the camp. They have improvement in every aspect of their life, psychological, particularly mental health. So that finding, I think, is very broadly applicable across similar post-conflict situation. It's also been found that giving people money and then letting, as opposed to trying to provide food directly, for example, giving people money and let them organize themselves is also superior to trying to say, no, you'll get this, to get physical rations. So those are just, a couple of examples. There are many more, and we have a humanitarian initiative that's kind of devoted to study these kind of issues. You cannot always do the study, but the point is that even when you cannot do the study, two things you can do. One is that there are insights from that probably do apply. And second is keeping the mindset on that being open-minded and learning is really helpful, can be maintained even if there is no experiment. You can just like that open-mindedness with the idea that it is really worth just trying your best guess and then be open to revising things as you learn more. It doesn't really require an RCT to have that mindset. And then the third thing is that sometimes it's actually possible, even when you think sometimes you can do something small, which looks like super detailed point, whatever, but in fact is, makes the difference between spending whatever little resources are there effectively versus not.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I don't see any new questions coming in. I have some of my own, but Swarnadeep, do you have some that you would like to raise at this point?
Go ahead, Sambar. I'll keep an eye on the chat.
All right. So one thing I was wondering is what do you think is the role of cost effectiveness calculations in setting priorities? And so you could relate to the effective altruism movement. What do you think? How what are the philosophical and methodological differences to effective altruism compared to what you are promoting through JPAL?
Effective altruism is a very big tent. So some part of, some movement, some part of the segment of effective altruism, perhaps the original, following most clearly Peter Singer, for example, have a clear-headed focus to, let's help the, most disadvantaged people first because they need it the most, which it definitely is something that I can get behind, or more than that I have lived my life by. That's the first principle. And the second is that when you do it, try and do it in the best way possible. And don't waste your time on things that don't work. That's also another one. Then it leads to, then you can be more subtle in terms of comparing cost effectiveness of various things to do. Often the details of the cost effectiveness can be quibbled with, but there are some things that are just ordered of magnitude different. That is good to know. For example, in education, there are many things you can do that have impact. Providing kids with deworming medicine is so easy to do and so cheap, and it makes them less sick and less able to retain the information, that it turns out to be an extraordinarily effective and cost-effective educational intervention. And so it makes sense to go and deworm. That doesn't mean you will stop there, because you might do things that might be less cost-effective than deworming, but you still want to go. You might be willing to spend a lot of money to make sure that kids are educated. What becomes more difficult to do, and that I think often is, not our job to do as economists, is to compare across sectors, because that requires having a value judgment for whether you think like health is more important than education, which I think better come out of the whatever policy process is there to aggregate preferences. So I think there are limits to the application of cost effectiveness to everything, which are the limits of democracy. But within, as long as someone gives you their objective and say, oh, my objective is to get kids to be in school more and to spend, to be absent less often, then there is no reason not to rank the ways to do it and to go for the best one.
Yeah, I see.
Now, there is a part of the cost-effective altruism movement now that has gone a little bit off the ramp by thinking that, if you push the reasoning too far, then you will not work in difficult circumstances because that's too costly to do and so on. And that seems that it clashes with basic human decency. But a lot of the cost of the effective altruism, kind of the original effective altruism movement, at least has had the focus of really saying, let's help the poorest people in the world and do it with seriousness, not just to feel good about it.
Ad hoc or yeah. I see meanwhile a question has come in. I will read it. For work in and or about Gaza, what concrete steps do you think are needed so that Gazan scholars and students actually set the research questions rather than just being local partners on projects designed elsewhere?
I think this is a super important question, of course, particularly pertinent in Gaza because there is already so much kind of human capital around, and on the other hand, so little resources. I think the way we've answered this question is to make tools available for people to learn, and then really trying our best to connect with Gaza scholars, to connect them, to network them, and make them able to take advantage of opportunity that exists for raising, for example, some funds for their own research, so that they are not local partners, they are in the driver's seat. So that's why I was talking about the online education offering, and the JPAL MENA office is trying to kind of create networks of scholars that can support autonomous research projects by researchers in the region.
Thank you for that. I'm not sure if there's a follow-up. Please write that down.
Swarnodeep, if do you have another question, Swarnodeep? Otherwise, I think we will wrap up at this stage.
Yeah, I think we are ready for your concluding comments, Christine.
Well, yes. Okay, yes. Then I think it was absolutely fascinating. And I'm thinking also, Dr. Duflo, that we will put you in touch with the scholars in Gaza who work on these issues. I'm a professor of philosophy, so it's not exactly my field, but it, of course, chimes with the things that we in philosophy work on, ethics and the relationship between ethics and economics. Thank you so very much. So this talk is recorded for all the participants. It will be put online, hopefully tonight or at the latest tomorrow on our dedicated YouTube channel. I will let you know. Thanks again, Esther. This was brilliant in a billion ways and eye-opening. Thank you to our wonderful respondents, Zombor and Swarnodeep, and obviously to our Gazan participants above all, because we are with you at all times and our heart is in Gaza. Thanks again, Esther, and we will upload this very soon. On behalf of scholars around the world and in Gaza in particular, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Merci encore. Bye.
Bye-bye.